On today's episode of Locked On Wild, what can Locked On Predators tell us about Yakov Trenin? Plus, we get the inside scoop as to what happened when Barry Trotz canceled a planned U2 concert.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. With the playoffs in the rearview mirror, the sports stop sporting the way we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there is something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we are joined by Kimmel of Locked On Predators for a crossover episode talking all things Yakov Trenin, all things Andrew Brunette and Darby Hendrickson, and we'll get the inside intel as to what happened that got Barry Trotz so upset he canceled a Predators group outing to go see U2. My name is Seth Toal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, and as mentioned, we got a great interview for you today with Kimmel of Locked On Predators. So without any further ado, enjoy.
Joined now by Seth Toal. He is the host of Locked On Wild. We are going to be talking about the Central Division. We are going to be talking about John Hein. We are going to be talking about Yakov Trenin. I've already warned Seth that could be a whole segment on my behalf as it is. Seth, thank you for joining us. This is going to be interesting. A lot going on between these two teams.
And thank you for having me. I enjoy doing these crossovers so much, and I'm glad that the listeners do too. We just love to get the other perspectives from teams around the Central Division. And so there's no shortage of connections between these two teams that we'll discuss. And so I'm really excited to be here, and it's going to be a good one.
Yeah. I always feel like when it comes to Nashville and Minnesota, it's very much like a small private Christian school where people just interdate. You know what I'm saying? Like when I think of these two teams, that's what I think of, because there is a lot of crossover, like we said, between these two teams. So to kick it off, I want to start with one of the biggest crossovers, and I think something that Nashville Predators fans are very interested to get your take on. And that is John Hein, of course, was head coach here in Nashville, replaced by Andrew Brunette, was hired in Minnesota. What is your takeaway from what you have seen from John Hein overall as he took over in Minnesota?
And it wouldn't be right if I didn't hop on Locked On Predators and use one of your show's bits in my response to this one. So I'm going to give you one word.
Come on.
And then I'm going to elaborate on it to go further. But the word that I'll use for John Hein is tactician.
Nice.
John Hein is a battle general out there. And some of the things that he put together for this team down the stretch, I really, really liked. And, you know, Nashville had an opportunity to see one of those play out in that overtime game in which Minnesota Wild said, "Goalie, what goalie?"
Yeah,
and that was just a taste of what we saw from Hein. He made some really good moves. He found a line combination in Kirill, Kaprizov, Matt Boldy, and Juuse Saaros that was amongst the best in the league once they were united. So that worked out really well. He turned Juuse Saaros into just a monster this past season, and put him in every situation in which the Wild needed a critical face-off, critical anything. And so he did a lot of really good things, from a tactical standpoint. And we saw a lot of a lot of adjustments made throughout games that we just
Right.
didn't really see during the Dean Evison tenure. And so those were things that I liked about John Hein's tenure. But, there are some other things that I need to see play out further, because this Minnesota Wild team is at a point where the ceiling's pretty limited for some of the players that they have on this roster. And then you've got this really, really good prospect pool.
Yes.
And it feels like some of those guys are ready to step in and give you more than these other players are capable of giving you. So now this year we're in this kind of in-between point where, are we going to get a chance to see those rookies and see what they're capable of? It could lift the ceiling of this team, I feel like, if they can just get some better production in a few key spots. And so is John Hines going to have a little faith in some of those rookie players for the first time, which that's kind of an uneasy area for coaches, is putting faith in rookies to come in and do the job, which is why you see so many veteran heavy teams. Will he be willing to do that this year? I feel like that can really tell the story as to how far this Minnesota Wild team is going to go.
Yeah. So interesting. I know that was something that we watched in John Hines' tenure here with some of the younger players as well. What is interesting is John Hines in Nashville took a lot of heat for maybe not buying into one particular younger player, Phil Tomasino. It is interesting, just to throw it out there for your listeners, this is a player that a new coaching staff has kind of landed where John Hines did as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in Minnesota, because we watched a very similar situation in Nashville. That's going to be something I think Nashville Predators fans are going to want to keep watching. I want to ask you about another coach. This is again, got a little wife swap going on here. Darby Hendrickson with the Minnesota Wild for forever and a day, survived feast, famine, beheadings, all of that, finally let go, and now hired by the Nashville Predators to come on with Andrew Brunette, who of course he played with, was an assistant coach with. I believe that he was even an assistant coach under Todd Richards, who is on the Predators coaching staff now. So, definitely a lot of connections there. Would love to hear your take on Darby Hendrickson. How did he survive so long there? And what does he bring behind the bench that Nashville Predators fans can be really looking for when it comes to working with this team?
The great part about this is I get to answer this with some things that Andrew Brunette said himself, because this is just perfect timing, because Michael Russo is filling in on one of the big radio stations here in Minnesota, K-Fan, for one of the afternoon hosts on their network, and he had Andrew Brunette on as a guest, and they talked about Darby Hendrickson. And the thing that Brunette raved about, the thing that I can confirm from what I have heard, is he is just so relatable to the players. He is the player representative of the coaching staff. And when he was here in Minnesota, oftentimes he was the go-between from the coaching staff to the players. And not that players couldn't go to Dean Evison or other coaches directly, but he was that voice between. If the coaches needed to deliver a message to a particular player to improve their performance, Darby Hendrickson was the guy to do it. He had such a rapport with these guys because he was one of them. And he knows the struggles. He knows the ups and downs. And so him being able to relate to that, I think, really carried weight in this organization. And I think that's a huge reason as to why he just stayed around as long as he did. He was tasked with one of his duties was faceoffs, and the Wild were never a great faceoff team. So I think that further underscores just how important he was to be kind of that voice for players to voice things, and for him to bring things from the coaching staff to particular players. Sounds like he'll be assisting with the power play in Nashville. which will be, it'll be interesting because it's fascinating because two of the assistant coaches that were under Dean Evison for the Minnesota Wild that are now in new places are doing completely different things. Like Bob Woods, who was longtime penalty kill assistant for the Minnesota Wild, is now coaching the power play for Seattle. And Darby Hendrickson, who is doing defense and faceoffs. Now, it's not to say he won't have some say in those areas too, but from what I've seen, sounds like he'll be handling the power play for Nashville. So that's just another interesting little nugget to this is like you had these coaches in spots here in Minnesota, and now they're going to other places and doing different things. But, that's a good metaphor for life too, is that just because you did something for X amount of years doesn't mean that's going to be what you continue to do. And so speaks a little bit to the versatility too, but players love him. And Brunette raved about that in the interview that he did. So
yeah,
I think he's going to be a good fit in Nashville. And Darby sought him out too. Like the moment that he was let go by the Minnesota Wild, obviously wanted to give some time for that to sink in. But this is a guy that Bruno wanted. And I think it'll be a good fit.
The Predators did not re-sign Dan Hein, who sort of played what it sounds like Darby's role was, very much kind of connecting with the players. So I think this sounds like a really good fit. And I know Andrew Brunette has raved about him. So I think this is a great piece. And Lord knows the Nashville Predators could use some help on the power play. Now, we did get Steven Stamkos too, so that's not going to hurt. But that's going to be interesting to see where he fits in coaching wise. I do want to ask you about goaltending. Before I ask a question, I just want to offer a thanks on behalf of every fan of the National Hockey League. Thank you for re-signing Marc-Andre Fleury, because nobody is ready for this league not to have him. So regardless of what it means for you and your team, thank you, because he is so delightful. But I do want to talk to you about the goaltending situation. You've got Marc-Andre Fleury. Of course, you've got Filip Gustavsson, but you also have this really intriguing young goaltender that I've watched quite a bit. Jesper Wallstedt played in the AHL, had some time in the NHL as well. Very interested in how is all of this going to sort out in net for the Wild? How are they going to balance these goaltenders? Who's going to be your kind of 1A, 1B? How is this going to work?
It's a great question because it would seem right now that you're not going to carry three. And it was rumored in the early part of the offseason that the Minnesota Wild were looking into what they could get in return for Filip Gustavsson and also Marco Rossi. And so just by those two players being two of the few that don't have trade protection in their contracts, it looks like that may have been Bill Guerin just trying to kind of see what's out there, because obviously he didn't find a return that he liked enough to make a move. But that leads us into a season in which it looks like it will be Filip Gustavsson and Marc-Andre Fleury again. And my big question to that is he's been in Iowa the last two seasons.
Right.
And this last year for Iowa was just a rough season all around for the team. You have a lot of young defensive prospects that struggled. And if he wasn't in net, they weren't going to win. My question is he going to learn more by getting more seasoning in Iowa, or just getting the full shake at the NHL level? Now, it sounds like there's a version of this in which he maybe comes with for road trips and, is an injury fill in to where he's getting 10 to 15 starts this season in those ways, which is fine. But I guess I just feel like personally, he probably has learned everything that he's going to learn at Iowa. And now it's just time. But Marc-Andre Fleury's not going anywhere, because this is his final season. This is his last go around. And he likes it here in Minnesota. He wants to stay here. He had the opportunity to go elsewhere last year and was not willing to do that. So then you're looking at Filip Gustavsson, and Filip Gustavsson is 25, 26 years old. He's 2 years removed from being, a top 2 goalie in the NHL.
Right.
And so it feels like it's probably premature to move him just for the sake of creating a spot. And so do the Wild play the ultimate, patience game in just seeing how things play out for those two guys and just trying to find spots for Jesper to get some starts. I would rather have options, and the Wild full organization top down. They added, I think, like 7 goalies to the organization this offseason to try to help with just having options.
Right.
And so it's not the worst thing to have all 3 guys, but my preference would be to not move Gustafsson for the sake of getting Jesper and Fleury together, because then next year it's just Wallstedt at the NHL level.
Right.
And I would much rather have Filip Gustavsson around to help navigate that post Fleury. So it's going to have to be figured out at some point between now and the start of the season. But at this point, I would guess that they're just going to keep all 3 and start the season at least with Fleury and Gus.
Yeah. Coming up, I'm guessing Seth may have some questions about goaltending in Nashville, because Nashville is in a very interesting situation as well. We're going to talk about what Nashville did this offseason and what may happen in net.
Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, you know me. I love sports. I love them so much I never want our favorite teams to stop playing. But with the playoffs in the rearview mirror, the sports just aren't sportsing the way that I would like them to. We have fewer games with just Major League Baseball going on. Now, the Olympics picking up has certainly given us a little bit more to watch. But even with them going on as well, FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you are in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
We are back with Seth Toal. He is the host of Locked On Wild, getting the scoop on everything Minnesota Wild, Nashville Predators. All right, Seth, I don't know if you've noticed, but things have been a little busy over in Nashville this offseason. So just wanted to open it up to any questions you may have, because I'm telling you right now, we are having a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's Nashville is the talk of the NHL. I know, because it has been brought up. The Predators have been brought up several times in the Western Conference Tuesday edition of Locked On NHL.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge fan, because Barry Trotz gave me the phrase of the offseason, serial winners.
Come on.
I am going to get that as a tattoo. I enjoy it so much. Maybe.
We hear it a lot.
Yeah, listeners, don't lock me into that until I've had a chance to further discuss it, because it literally just came to my head. So don't lock me into that. But before we get to some of those big moves, Ann, I do want to get your thoughts on Yakov Trenin, because my position has been that Trenin is a guy that can provide in the 2 areas that the Wilds need to be better.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked about this with Joey Erickson of Locked On Stars. It feels very much like that meme where the kid is at the store with his parents and he says, "Mom, I want a box of Rice Krispies." And she says, "We have Rice Krispies at home." It feels like the Wild have 2 or 3 different versions of Yakov Trenin. Trenin may be the best version of those 3, but it feels like they've already have a few guys like that. So sell me on the Yakov Trenin experience. What can he bring to this Wild team? And what did you think of his tenure in Nashville?
Well, first of all, I do just want to be upfront and transparent and say that personally, I adore him. Yakov Trenin is just in the locker room. He is such a great young man, loved in the locker room, great teammate, great locker room guy. He will shock you with how dry and witty he is. His sense of humor is on point. Also, little bit of trivia, fantastic cook. So just tuck
Oh,
that away in case, you're wondering where you want to go for like a really good meal. Yakov Trenin's your guy. This is an interesting one for us because he is a bit of a fan favorite in Nashville, and that kicked off back in 2021, 22. He was a part of what we lovingly called the herd line with Tanner Jeannot and Colton Sissons, and had a really good season, 17 goals. And it felt a little bit like that was Yak's coming out party. Well, then eventually Tanner Jeannot moved on, and you didn't quite see the same offensive production from Yakov Trenin that you thought you were going to get consistently from that point on. Um, so this is a mixed bag. Here's what I will tell you you will get from Yakov Trenin. You are going to get a very physical forward. He was here in Nashville just for 60 games, was traded at the deadline to Colorado, but was fifth on the team at the end of the season in hits. Had over 200 hits by the end
wow.
of the season. Yeah, this is a guy who is extremely physical. So if you are looking for that, you're going to get it with Yakov Trenin. A little bit streaky when it comes to scoring. I've got to be honest with you. When he's hot, he's hot. When he's not so much. So, you've got to kind of see if you can get him maybe with the right people. And I think we saw that with the right people, with Colton Sissons and Tanner Jeannot, there is a next level for Yakov Trenin, but you've got to get him with the right people. He is probably not going to be the guy you bring in who makes the others on his line better.
Okay.
It's going to be vice versa there. But again, does some penalty killing, very physical. His skating, not attractive, but the guy gets it done. It's a little bit like a drunk bear on skates, but gets it done, gets where you want him to be. And I will say this, like he plays very well away from the puck as well. So there's a lot of good things about Yakov Trenin, but I wonder if your meme, I don't know, I don't know, you may be onto something. But again, did I mention he can cook?
That seals it for me. It's just a situation where I would have liked to have seen one of those other Yakov Trenin type players maybe moved off the roster.
Yeah.
And a little more skill, a little more scoring
Yes.
added in
Yeah.
their place. A little more Gustav Nyquist, who I gotta ask you, because Lockdown Wild was banging the table for him to get a more elevated role in the postseason against the Dallas Stars. He was one of the bright spots of that series, in a series in which there weren't a ton.
Mm-hmm.
And the Wild obviously had some salary constraints to where they couldn't re-sign him, and so they opted to re-sign Marcus Johansson to fill that spot. But then you look at Nyquist, and he has like his best season of all time. Like,
yes.
Was it just, as you said, was it just the case of getting the right players around him to allow him to ascend into a guy that if I looked at the numbers correctly, he was close to a point per game?
Career season for Gus Nyquist. I think there's a couple things at play. I do think it was really that top line of Nashville with Nyquist, Ryan O'Reilly, and Philip Forsberg.
Oof.
It was immediate chemistry. And this became three players. And I've gone back recently and rewatched some goals from the season who just knew where the other person was going to be and when. And Gus Nyquist had some assists on Philip Forsberg's goals that were so beautiful I could cry. I mean, the level of play that he brought. So I do think it was just this line came together and was really hockey magic. I also think there was an element of I'm going to prove something. And
Yeah.
Nashville really went all in on Gus Nyquist and Ryan O'Reilly, two veterans who I think some people felt like maybe Nashville overpaid, maybe thought too much of, and they really came in and proved their worth. It also helps that part of what Nashville needed from Nyquist was leadership in the locker room. And they want to reset this culture. And you bring in somebody like Gus Nyquist, who this is a guy who wants to win. I mean, he is just as hungry now as he was when he started in the NHL to win. And so that changes locker room culture as well. So it just really was a great fit for him. I would be surprised. I would be very surprised, even with the additions that Nashville made in the offseason. I would be surprised if Andrew Brunette would break up Ryan O'Reilly, Gus Nyquist, and Philip Forsberg, because that line has chemistry. I mean, they just were phenomenal.
Yeah, I looked at on Daily Faceoff at least the line combinations once all of the big moves were made, and I had to breathe into a paper bag because it gave me some chest palpitations, and I started sweating, and I will echo your point too. Just looking at the potential power play units, I think Nashville's power play will be much better this year. But
nowhere to go but up. I will tell you this. Nowhere to go but up. But yeah, it's going to get exponentially better.
I'm going to have to go to a game in Nashville because I've never been to Nashville, and I do want to cover a Wild game on the road this year. So
let's go.
Maybe
we'll get some hot chicken. You can eat it. I don't eat spicy food, but you can have some hot chicken.
I'm in. And just one quick final one for you here before we take a look at the Central Division.
Yep.
What concert is Barry Trotz going to have to cancel this year for Nashville to have similar levels of success? I got to hear what all went into that, because it's one of the craziest stories of last season. I don't know if it's indicative of Barry Trotz hating you too, or if it's just indicative of, like, at some point a GM or a coach has to just put a foot down and say, we're not doing this until you guys figure your bleep out.
Yes. So let me give you I'm going to give you the inside scoop and tell you how it went down for us, because we sat through the most excruciating 9-2 loss to the Dallas Stars. And I would hate for you to think, it was just a little painful. It was excruciating. And we got in that locker room, and there wasn't a media person who wanted to be there. And we got, interestingly enough, Gus Nyquist. And I have never in my life seen a player talked to a player as agitated, frustrated, angry, at a loss for words as Gus Nyquist was. I've never seen him like that, ever. I've never seen another player like that after that game. So then we go in and we sit down and we're ready for Andrew Brunette to come in. And Andrew Brunette comes in, and I don't think I need to tell you, he was not feeling it. And you're trying to ask questions where you're not poking the bear, but you're figuring out what the flag nog just happened. Like, what happened? And Andrew Brunette makes this offhanded comment, and he said very disgustedly, I guess everybody's just busy thinking about their vacations and not thinking about hockey. And we were all like, I'm sorry, what? Like, it had just been after the All-Star break. So we're like, is he thinking they're still on vacation? Like, what? Because nobody knew anything about this U2 trip. They had kept it very under wraps. And all of us after media were like, what is he talking about? Like, what is this vacation comment? Well, then the news broke. And Barry Trotz and Andrew Brunette had already gone in the locker room before media got in there and said, it ain't happening. You are not going to make people in Nashville pay good money to see a product and put that out on the ice and then hop on a plane and go fly and watch U2. Not going to do it. And so flights were changed. Hotel bookings were changed. All of that was changed. The players had bought tickets for some of the staff so that the staff could come along and go to U2. Canceled. It was, when we heard what had happened, we were like, ooh. Now, I will tell you this. A lot of away games played U2 in warm-ups after that. Which I thought, I'm like, ooh. I'm so here for the petty. But it did kick off an 18-game point streak that got Nashville into the postseason. So it all turned out well. But I am telling you, that was one of the most bizarre evenings covering this team. And until we could put together what had really happened. Yeah, it was something.
I remember seeing on X that something like that had, and I think it was actually Nick that brought it to my attention first. And I'm like, there's no way this is real.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
this isn't a headline of something that happens, and then you see it circulated in a couple of other spots, and you're like, okay, this is real, and this is the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Barry Trotz and Andrew Burnett were like, unpack your bags, boys.
They're like, we are not not going to see you two. We are going to play better.
I will tell you this. The plan is when Nashville wins a Stanley Cup and has a parade on Broadway, they want you two there playing. That's how they're going to make it up to them. So we'll see what happens.
That's the only way to redeem this.
That's right. Coming up, we are going to talk about a couple of players to watch from each team, and we are going to make some Central Division predictions. All right, Seth, before we get into the whole Central Division, I want you to give me the name of maybe a younger player that you think is going to kind of come out of the shadows in Minnesota, and talk to me about a veteran to keep an eye on this season.
My young player, I'm going to go with Liam Ogren, because I had a chance to see him at Wild Development Camp, and there are a lot of ways to evaluate where a player's at in their process. But just looking the part is, I think, the most impressive one. And just man amongst boys out there, amongst the rest of the Wild prospects. And he did get a cup of tea with the team last year. He played in 4 games. He did score a goal. But we talk about having an opening on the second line in a wing spot to complement the great season that Marco Rossi had, a season where if he would have gotten a little better help, could have been way better than it was.
Mm-hmm.
I think Liam Ogren can be that guy. And it got to the point that spot on that line was such a point of contention that it got me to do math. And we know, everyone should know, I'm not good at math. And you look at, if you can get somebody to come in and put up 150 shots in that spot and shoot 10%, that's 15 goals. Yep. That already has exceeded what Marcus Johansson did in that spot last year. If you get somebody to have 200 shots on net and shoot 10%, that's 20 goals. And all of a sudden, if you have somebody that is willing to shoot the puck, but is also a big enough body to physical enough body to battle for the puck along the edges and maybe get some passes off to Marco Rossi right in front of the net. And if Matt Zuccarello stays on that spot as kind of the pass option for that line, that's a second line that can maybe give you a little more scoring than they did as the season unfolded last year. So Liam Ogren is my young player for sure. There are a couple of young players that could potentially make this Wild roster, depending on how it plays out. But then for a veteran, I'm going to go with Ryan Hartman. You know, he's a known name. He's a known name in Nashville. He gets kind of thrown in because of all the players that have been extended with trade protection, and like, well, why are we extending all these veteran guys? We should be looking to the future. I think Ryan Hartman brings you enough valuable things that I'm not really concerned about his extension as much as some of the others. He's versatile. He can play wing. He can play center. He plays with a ton of edge, but he's also a guy that can shoot the puck and can score. And so if Liam Ogren doesn't pan out in that second spot, John Hines at the end of the season talked about him as being a guy that the team wants to see more of this season. Wouldn't be surprised if Hartman gets an opportunity to try to fill that role too. Ideally, I think he's probably more suited as like a third line guy, but he did play with Kirill and Matt Zuccarello a couple of seasons ago and scored 35 goals. So the shooting and the scoring is there. It's just a matter of the fit and the components on the other parts of the line. And so Nashville, that's a name to watch, but that's a name you knew already. But still, I feel like a guy who is primed to have a little bit of a bounce back year. And I say that he was 5th on the team in goals with 21. So it's not like he had a an awful season by any stretch. Just feels like maybe he could offer a little more.
Interesting. Yeah, this is definitely a name Nashville knows. Yeah. When you look at the Central Division, and it's so frustrating. Nashville, did all of these great offseason moves and all of this, but you still look at the Central Division and it is so tough. Where do you see Minnesota ending the season in the Central? How do you see this panning out?
So I look at it as some pretty clear defined boundaries as to how the Central Division is going to play out. And you look at the teams that are at the top. I go Dallas, Colorado, Nashville, and Winnipeg as my those are my four that are definitely making a run for the postseason this year and have probably pushed themselves to the top of the line. Now, order, that's anybody's guess.
Right.
But I feel like those four are the teams that are definitely going for it at the top. Then I draw a little bit of a line. I put St. Louis and Minnesota in kind of the same position, just as teams that we don't really know what we're going to get. St. Louis has been pretty vocal about them being, taking a little bit of a step back, being in more of a rebuild. The Wild are obviously still going for it.
Right.
But are they going to be able to do something that they didn't do hardly at all last year, which is contend with those top teams amongst Colorado and Dallas and Winnipeg and even Nashville? I think the Wild had one win all season against those teams. So if you're going to be a postseason team, you got to beat those guys. You got to at least contend with them, stay with them, and pull a few wins away. And so I would say at the best, the Wild are probably fifth in the division behind those four. How the order itself plays out just kind of depends on what happens throughout the season, but they're definitely at least fifth for me. If things go wrong for the Wild, sixth, seventh.
Yeah.
We'll have to see.
It's interesting because Minnesota is one of those teams where you look at the roster and it feels like it could go either way. It really feels like they could make a push. There's, you look at the roster, there's every reason to think this is a team that could really make a push. But again, there's a little bit of wizardry in hockey, timing, injuries, chemistry, special teams, all of these things play in. So I do think it's going to be really interesting to see where Minnesota falls. Nashville is another one where you look at what we've done and you think, yes, we're going to be a team contending. Well, stink. There's Colorado and Dallas and Winnipeg just sitting right there. Couldn't y'all go somewhere else? I think for Nashville, it's going to depend on how quickly things connect.
Yep.
And look, October is no cakewalk for Nashville. They've got the Oilers twice and they start off with Dallas and they've got Boston in October. So I think a lot about how Nashville is going to do this season is going to depend on how quickly players like Stamkos and Marchessault and Brady Shea can get up to speed with what Andrew Brunette wants and with line mates. So I do think Nashville is going to be more of a contender. The expectation in Nashville is you are going to make the playoffs and you are going to get out of the first round.
Yep.
That will be success. Everything else will be gravy this season. Now, next season, expectations are going to be even higher. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly Nashville can put these pieces in and get things moving together.
Yeah, I think you're right on because, that's the part of the process I think people are kind of glossing over a little bit, is that it is going to take this some time to gel.
Absolutely.
These are guys that are, especially in Steven Stamkos's case, he's played with the same guys for like 10 years.
Yes.
And so he's developed tendencies for where guys are going to be at particular times. And yes, he's still going to have very good players on his line, whichever line it ends up being, whether it be with former Minnesota Wild center for about 10 minutes, Ryan O'Reilly. Whoever it ends up being, there will be the chemistry is going to be there because they're good players, but it will take time to just hone in some of that to where you get it down to like a science. It's just going to take a little time for it to fully develop into what everybody hopes this roster can fully achieve.
Yeah, it's going to be an adjustment period. We're trying to temper early expectations and say, look, it's going to be up and down until we get these guys, where they need to be and get that chemistry built. So it's going to be interesting to see if Nashville can do enough early to keep them in contention later as well.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a wild season in this Central Division. I'm telling you, I think the Central Division is going to be the division to watch this season. And of course, to do that, you need to check out Locked On Wild, Locked On Preds. We'll keep you up to date on everything. Before we sign off, Seth, let everyone know where they can find you and the podcast.
You can find me on X at Seth Toups, and you get the firsthand experience of living as a Minnesota sports fan, because let's be honest, Minnesota sports is just eternally taking that board of it's been 0 days since the Minnesota sports team has done something just debilitating. It's just constantly erasing that number and putting a 0 up, and so I live a lot of that. The nice thing about the show is that all the socials are just at Locked On Wild. And so if you want a little bit more of an inside look as to the Minnesota Wild heading into the season, that is, in my humble opinion, the perfect place to find it.
Absolutely. And you can check out my work online at social media too. I'm at AnnK_Mama on Ice. Of course, you can find Locked On Predators wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube, just like Locked On Wild. Seth, love catching up with you. Love catching up with all of the old dates that we had, Ryan Hartman, et cetera, in our little Christian school of hockey dating. So it's been great. And of course, we will check in with you later in the season when these two teams face off.
I look forward to it so much. And just because of how much I'm excited to see the city, I'm rooting for Nashville all year this year.
Let's go. And come here. We'll do hot chicken.
Yeah.
Sounds great.